You're now listening to Sound Talent Media. Check out more shows at soundtalentmedia.com.
Shopify grows your business no matter how far or big you grow. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. Whether you're selling your fans' next favorite shirt or an exclusive piece of podcast merch, Shopify helps you sell everywhere. Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the U.S. Allbirds, Rothy's, Brooklinen, and millions of other entrepreneurs of every size across 175 countries. Plus, Shopify's award-winning help is there to support your success every step of the way. Because businesses that grow, grow with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in.
Hey, what's up, everyone? I'm Matt Migaki, the vocalist of Cryptopsy and the host of the Vox and Hops Metal Podcast, where I sit down with fellow metal musicians. We talk all about their lives and music while sharing killer craft beers. If you've ever wanted to sneak backstage and share a beer with one of your favorite musicians, well, Vox and Hops is the podcast for you. This week on the podcast, I dropped an amazing episode with Muffy of the Sunset Bar. There is this episode and over 450 other ones to help you enjoy life, metal, and craft beer. So what are you waiting for? It's time to become a Vox and Hops head. Cheers!
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. Today, I am talking with my dear friend from the UK, Mr. Joe Branton from the Guitar Nerds podcast. Yes, the man has been on several times. He is always an excellent guest, and this one is no exception. We get real into some bass territory because obviously he plays a lot of bass. He plays it in a band called Polymath, and we get into some theories around gear and songwriting that he is now approaching the band with that I rather like. Bass amps, my weird bass situation. There's a lot of bass on this episode. And on the Patreon, we got really weird with it. I know I say that every time because that's where I like to get weird. I like to get strange. I like to get off the beaten path. But I wanted to get a little more into the things that Joe likes that aren't really music related. The man has talked for hours and hours and hours and hours on his podcast, on other people's podcasts, on the internet in general about gear. And I just wanted to peel back the curtain a little bit and dive into some of the other things that Joe likes. Scotch, for example. Well, specifically, the history of Scotch as it comes from Ireland? What? Yeah, we get into that. We get into Star Trek. We get into The Watchmen. We get into lots of stuff over there on Patreon that you may have never heard Joe talk about before, despite his many hours of podcasting that are available on the interwebs. So if you like this show and you like to hear a little bit of weird stuff, Patreon is the place to go. So go to patreon.com/tonemob, where for $5 a month, you can support the show, get ad-free episodes, and just lots of general tomfoolery. But that's not what this episode's about. This episode's actually fairly on topic. So I'll quit blabbering so I can start blabbering here in just a second. Let's go. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Tone Mob Podcast, the show about guitar stuff, occasionally, sometimes. I'm your host, Blake Weiland, and with me today I have returning Mr. Joe Branton.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Oh, sorry. That wasn't very professional. I didn't even let you finish. Hello, everyone. Hello, Blake. Thanks for having me back. It's always lovely to be on your absolutely wonderful, gorgeous, supercharged mega podcast.
Oh, wow. Is that what it is? Are you sure about that?
Oh, yes, I am.
Okay. Well, you would know. You've been doing it longer than I have, so.
About the same time.
It's close. It's close. You did beat me, though. I feel like I always have to remind you of that you've been doing this a little, like, maybe a year. I don't know what it is exactly, but enough before me that you definitely won.
Right, I see. Well, technically, I was only comic relief for the first 5 seasons of...
the Metamorphosis has been interesting to listen to as a podcast fan of the show, hearing and I've actually had people talk about it. I'm sure you've heard it too, but like I never thought Joe would mature into the responsible, showrunner of the bunch.
Yeah, I guess if you listen to those early ones, like the amount of stuff that Mark Packham used to have to cut from the podcast because I was just drunk and it was just ramblings.
Mm-hmm.
And now, look at me.
Now you leave it in.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, those were good days. But I think the show's really it's always been good, in my opinion. I've always been a fan of it, but it's really I feel like it's really hitting a stride that people know what to expect, and in a good way. And it's it's become one of the established pillars of the guitar media world, which is pretty cool to see. And weird that it takes so long for this stuff to happen sometimes, but it's definitely
I guess so, yeah.
one of the go-tos, at least in my mind.
Yeah, I of course still absolutely love doing it. I love podcasting more than anything else. I know, like, we all have to do all the other things. We make videos, we're on Instagram, we do all of the other stuff too. But the thing that I love, and the thing that I got into this for and decided to carry on doing it for, was the podcast. Because there's something just a bit more, there's something there's a bit more integrity about a podcast than I think like a YouTube video or Instagram channels. It's just, the focus isn't us, it's not you being Blake Wyland or me being Joe Branton. It is the gear, and it is us getting to talk about this thing that we are complete nerds about. We've spent our lives getting overly obsessed with the gear side of making music, almost ridiculously so.
Oh, definitely ridiculously so. For sure, ridiculously so.
I love that. There are so few things that I really, really care about, but those things I go down deep rabbit holes, and it's great to have sort of music equipment. Gear is a big one of those, alongside whiskey and Star Trek are my other two big ones, probably.
Of course. So that actually ties into a question that when somebody's been doing something as long as you have, as obsessed as we are, well, if we weren't obsessed, there's no way we would still be doing this. There's absolutely no way. But I imagine it comes somewhat in ebbs and flows. I mean, there's always a baseline level of interest. But for me, sometimes it's like, oh, I'm really into pedals at this moment. I'm right. Well, as a baseline, I'm always really into pedals, but sometimes I get even more into them. And then I'll pull back and I'll be more focused on some other aspect. Or sometimes music takes a little bit of a back seat for me because I'm working in it and on it all day, every day, which is what the goal was. So I'm very happy about that. But there are times when I'm like, I'm going to go read a comic book now because it has nothing to do with anything. Do you experience that as well?
A little bit, like, sort of it's not behind the curtain side of it, dear listener, but obviously Blake does an awful lot of work with Stringjoy, and I run social media for lots of companies as well. So I do KMA Machines, Ashdown Engineering, Fidelity Guitars, Great Eastern Effects Co., and I'm doing some stuff with Zona Guitars at the moment. So there's always like so many. Oh, and I write articles for Boss. I write all their guides, all their user guides and stuff like that. So there's quite a lot. Like, it is, I work 6 days, and so it is a lot of guitar stuff, a lot of managing channels, and different companies want different things from their channels as well. So you have to wear so many different hats and be so many different people and have so many different voices when you're creating content and stuff. So yeah, it definitely, I absolutely love it, but I feel that I agree with you. I'll have times where I'm really obsessed with particular things, whether it's strings, pedals, basses, amplifiers, recording, plug-in setup, stuff like that. I definitely go through all of those things, but I really appreciate having my downtime, which is just my other obsessions, which is which is just whiskey and Star Trek. So
yeah, it's I think it's important to, I mean, when you are lucky enough like we are to be able to do and work in an industry that we really, really love, work can oftentimes just become one thing. You know, somebody was asking me the other day, like, oh, how do you manage your time between Tone Mob stuff, Stringjoy stuff, and any of the other things you're doing? And I'm like, honestly, I don't manage it. It all just blends together into one thing. And yes, while I don't separate them mentally, you know, if I'm working on a project or a piece of content for Tone Mob, that's fine. But it doesn't feel any different to me than when I'm working on a piece of content for Stringjoy. It's exactly the same.
That's,
you know.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's something you've managed to cultivate, where it is always the Blake Wylam voice. I don't necessarily have that as much because I have to be different people for different companies. You know, but.
I have a couple that I still do stuff for. One regularly and one not. I'd say off and on.
It's Mr. Black, isn't it? You do a lot of stuff with.
I do a lot of stuff for Mr. Black content wise. Yeah,
right.
But it's definitely a completely different personality behind that one.
Right. Yeah.
As you can tell.
Yeah.
And it's not always me. So there's that too. But it's just kind of a weird thing to try to, like, the way I used to do a lot more what you do is working with lots of different brands and writing and doing their content. And I really did like that, but it was weird how you had to become a different X-Man for each one. Like there's always a bit of you there, but you're like, well, I don't want this to sound exactly the same.
No, yeah. Which X-Man is it that is everyone? Is it Rogue? We have to be that.
Rogue. Yep. Yes. Rogue. You have to touch everybody's shoulders and suck their power out and
suck their what?
Become the new one. Yes. But all that aside, this is a kind of an interesting thing that we don't talk about all the time, but I do with other creators. It's if you were trying to break into podcasting, YouTube, whatever, right now in 2024, A, would you do it? And B, how would you do it? Because it's definitely different than when we got started.
Oh, absolutely. I think something that you and me benefit from in podcasting is being able to be pretty general, because we've been around for so long. We're so established, I guess, as the term. But we've been around so long that we have the ability to be very general and also to pivot whenever we really want. Whereas I think if I was starting now, I would find a specific niche. A podcast that I think does really well at that is a podcast called In the Pocket, which is by a guy called Johnny Dibble. And it's a bass-specific podcast, but they have a really interesting edge because they're both function bass players, essentially, fundamentally. So they come at it from, and they're not in the industry, so they come at it from a really not drinking the Kool-Aid edge of just wanting gear that does the job right for what they do. And they still
of what it is type of thing.
Exactly. And they still get as excited as we do about gear, but it comes from a different perspective, and I really like that. I appreciate that it's still relatively general. It's just about bass, but definitely that would be my thing. If I was starting a podcast now, I'd want to have an absolute thing. I really like what is the Andy Offling one? The object worship. That's a great idea for a podcast. Just it's still about guitar gear, but what we're saying is each podcast is about a single thing. It could be when I did it was a compressor pedal. It was the Boss CS2, but it can be anything, a guitar, an amplifier, but it's a podcast about loving one individual thing, and that's really interesting and cool, and a great way to achieve longevity as well, because you there are so many things. Each podcast is just one thing. You've got infinite episodes. But so I guess that would be my advice. Have a real specific, interesting niche.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense, and it is cool that we get to be a little more open. Mine has just kind of evolved into sometimes, depending on the person, just less gear and more just
more pizza.
Them. Yeah, pizza, of course. But it's more like, tell me your story. What's going on? And because some people I talk to aren't even that into gear. They're
Right.
just like they like to write songs or whatever. I was just hanging out with a former guest, Colby Acuff. He's a country music artist. I really, really love his songwriting. He doesn't care about gear.
Yeah.
He likes same thing as like the In the Pocket guys. He likes stuff that gets the job done. It does what it's supposed to do, and he can make his music, but he's not sitting there obsessing over the nuances of different Telecaster pickups. He's got his acoustic guitar. He's like, I like this guitar, this capo, these strings, good to go. And I can write my music. And there's some like level of, I don't know if admiration is the right word, but it's like being on the other side of it. Sometimes I'm like, man, it would be cool to just not care about that at all. And just rip it and rip it,
Every time I feel like I meet a bass player or a guitarist, just a musician, that I'm like, damn, like I really love what you do. Like they're so inspirational, they're so interesting and different. And 9 times out of 10, they don't care about the gear. Like 9 times out of 10, it's the same bass that they've been using, since day dot, because that's not what the important bit is for them.
Mm-hmm.
The important bit is it's the reason that I'm not a better player than I am, and I'm sure, dear listener, that's the same for a lot of us. If we're listening to guitar podcasts, you're not practicing, and
no, don't turn it off. Don't turn it off. I need you, please. My family needs you.
Sorry,
but it's true. Like I listen to less music podcasts than I used to. For a lot of that reason. Like, I keep up with yours. I keep up with 60 Cycle, but like, and then I do Chasing Tone as well, but I don't listen to the Chasing Tone one anymore. I haven't for years. And so people will message me like, what did you say? What were you saying about so-and-so on this? I'm like, well, I don't know. Plus we record them a week in advance. And so but by the time people hear them, I'm like, that's 2 weeks old. I have no idea what I said 2 weeks ago.
I wish I did that. I wish I had more time. I only have a day to sort of record in an evening, and I have to edit either that evening or the next morning to get it out.
It stresses me out so much.
Yeah, it stresses me. I'm thinking about moving the podcast a day later in the next series. I don't want to do it halfway through a season, but I definitely want to give myself a day.
I try to do... Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. Mm-hmm. I was going to say, on the note of 60 Cycle Hum, Ryan is just getting better looking all the time.
I know. How?
His beard is just great. Not too long, not too short. It's just really well groomed. He just looks fantastic.
He does.
He's such a lovely man.
I know. I'm kind of jealous because mine is, I still can't grow a mustache. Well, I can. It's just a different color than the rest of my beard, so it looks
You
weird.
And me combined are create Ryan, I guess.
I guess, yes. A dark Ryan, though.
Yeah, of course.
Which is probably true in personality as well, actually, if that was to happen.
He is lovely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Be like a Ryan that's short, a little bit angrier, and listens to like not surf, I guess.
Yeah. Exactly. But we're all, we're all getting older, Blake. We've been doing this, both of us have been doing this a decade, 60 Cycle Hum, similar time scale. Dear listener, you must be getting on as well. We were all a long way from where we all started. How old are you, Blake?
Yeah, I'll be 36 in August.
Oh, right. Oh, you are still young. That's fine. I'm 40 in like a week.
That's only a few years away, though. Like that's
but you're still there. Yeah. Come on, you've only just in your last year become closer to 40 than you are to 30.
This is true. This is true. And I was just talking to somebody. It was in Nashville actually, and I don't know how it came up. It was like talking about like sports and like what sports did you play in high school? And I was like, I participated in a lot of mosh pits. Does that count? Like is difficult?
Is it a difficult? Well, if you're not interested in sports at all, I guess it doesn't matter. But is it a difficult discussion in the States? Because you've got like 3 major sports, whereas whilst we also have cricket and rugby alongside football, you can guarantee that you can have a conversation about football with anyone in the country.
Right. It's I don't know, because I hang out with a lot of musicians, so it's not as weird to not be into it. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Excuse me, but everybody, I think, maybe this is not true, but I think everybody has at least a passing interest in some aspect of sport because there is so many things. There's the major ones, baseball, basketball,
The best one.
football. But then there's also, hockey is also very big. Boxing and MMA are huge. And so, like, even if you're not you're probably at least have a passing interest in one of those things, because there's just so much of it. So it's not like I can't talk about it. It's not like I don't. I mean, I do like a little boxing. I do like basketball, as long as it's only speaking about the Portland Trail Blazers, because I don't care about any other team. Which is, listeners, if you know that, that's rough for me right now, because they're absolutely horrendous.
What's the Portland baseball team?
We don't have one really. We have a minor league team. Yeah, we got a minor league team, the Beavers. But we do not have the only professional sports team we have is the Blazers. Oh nope, that's a lie. We also have a soccer/football team, the Timbers, which I forgot about because I'm American.
It hasn't quite worked its way into your psyche yet in the States.
It's actually it's very popular in Portland. People really, really like soccer here, which probably pencils and makes some sort of sense, I think. And the Timbers fans are known for being rabid, and I have friends who are not really sports fans who have been to Timbers games. Like, you will become a Timbers fan if you go to a game. It's so much fun. So it's
the best thing about football. It's when you get into sort of I guess you would say minor league, like when you get into sort of more local teams, less national, not national, but less major teams. You get such great vibes at football games, such lovely communities.
That makes sense.
I'm a big fan of sort of conference is our low league for football. So I like going to watch conference games. They are good.
That makes some sense. Yeah, and there's a lot of people who are really into the the college sports as well, which is like,
of course, college sports. That's a big thing for you guys.
Really big, yeah. Especially college football. It's really big for a lot of people. I don't care, but it's big for a lot of people.
Sorry, I feel like I've moved this entire podcast onto a subject that you absolutely don't care about.
It's not. I come off that way. I care slightly more than maybe I give off or think about on a regular basis. But yeah, I think what it is for me, and what it was especially in school, because this is what people tune in for, is that I just wasn't that into the team aspects of sports, which is why I always I've always been interested in fight sports and individual things.
I see.
I think that's probably why I'm interested in powerlifting and all that stuff, because it's just like, it's an individual pursuit mostly, and I like that. I think that's it, if I'm psychoanalyzing myself.
Hi, I'm Vincent, and I'm here to talk about the Mercury X. My dad's always going on and on about how cool Maris is. He really went off on one about the Mercury X the other day. He said something about a 4,800 hertz sample rate and 99 preset locations in 33 banks, and something along the lines of the most advanced reverb pedal ever devised by man. That's all true, but I only care about one thing. This pedal sounds sick. So make sure you check out the Mercury X and all the other fine products at maris.us, as well as fine retailers worldwide. All right, Dad, now can I have my Pocky?
How exactly do artists get their music on Spotify, Apple Music, Deezer, Tidal, all these services? How in the world do you get your music there? Well, in the past, you had to use something called a record label. But these days, you can use DistroKid. DistroKid is the absolute easiest way to get your music up on streaming services, and it's the most affordable way to do so. Not only do plans start at $22.99 for the entire year, that's less than $2 a month, DistroKid also does not take a cut of your streaming revenue, unlike some other services out there. Even better if you sign up by going to tonemob.com/distrokid. That's tonemob.com/distrokid. One more time, that's tonemob.com/distrokid. You'll get 30% off. That's right, 30% off their already extremely reasonable prices. So go to tonemob.com/distrokid and get your music out there. We are brought to you today by Sweetwater, specifically the Gear Exchange. You may have heard about this. This is a place where you can go to buy and sell your used gear. Maybe you got a pedal over there that's just kind of collecting dust. Maybe there's something you've been eyeing from the Sweetwater catalog. Well, right now is a great time to turn that unused gear into something you're actually going to use. Even better, if you sell on the Gear Exchange, you can keep 100% of the sale as long as you choose a Sweetwater gift card as your payout method. That is not too shabby because, let's be honest, most of this buying and selling we do is just to fund new gear purchases, and that is a great way to reach a wide variety of customers and keep 100% in your pocket, or rather on your pedal board. So go check out the Sweetwater Gear Exchange and turn that unused gear into something that's actually going to help you write that next huge riff.
How's the powerlifting going? Every time I see you lifting something massive, it's you look like it's going really well. It looks like you're just becoming a real beefcake.
I'm trying to. It's going really well. I've had a coach for a couple years now, which I've never had before, and that has made a world of difference.
Wow.
It's weird. When you hire somebody who does it for a living, it's almost like they do it for a living and know what they're doing.
So you're going to be a regular Eddie Hall soon.
I don't think I'll ever get to that level,
okay.
but
right. Okay.
I wish.
I wasn't sure if you get that one because there's an American one who's similar to Eddie Hall, and I can't remember his name.
So Eddie's great. I follow all these guys. So Strongman is slightly different than powerlifting. Oh, I mean, if anybody hears me say that from that world, they're going to get really mad at me. But Eddie Hall's a strongman, and that's actually, in my opinion, much harder than powerlifting because it's more dynamic, explosive, and you're simply not gonna place well unless you're enormous. Eddie Hall,
he's massive.
Brian Shaw,
Brian Shaw, that's the guy. Yeah.
Or Thor from Game of Thrones.
Of course, yeah, he's there as well. Doesn't do as well though. He's got the celebrity aspect. Well. I mean, he does pretty well. He was no Eddie Hall or Brian Shaw.
I see how it is. Getting the digs in. But my coach actually is a strongman competitor as well. He won 2020 Oregon Strongest Man, and
that's incredible.
He's a beast. Yeah,
Oregon's a big
Joe.
place.
Hello, Joe. Joe, you're not listening to this, but hello, Joe. Coach Joe. He's great. And hey, if anybody's listening, you should look up Coach Joe because he knows what he's doing. And he just recently went to coaching independently. He was working for a company, and now he's doing it all on his own. So honestly, look him up. He is incredible at what he does. So he's taken me from he's taken me to places I never thought I'd be able to get to in a relatively short time. So
wow,
yeah, good stuff.
That's awesome. That is really awesome. I'm really glad to hear it's going
Joe.
well.
You can get that in the mail. Anyway, all that aside, what has been inspiring you lately? What has been tripping your trigger musically, whether that's a band or a piece of gear or a project you're working on? What have you been obsessed over lately?
So actually, my band Polymath, we're just starting now to track our new record.
Ooh.
And it's so our sax player left the band last year. Now, our last record was our first record with him, so it's not like he wasn't he hadn't been in the band for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
We basically had him for that record, and then we parted ways. And we're loving being back to being a 4-piece. We've been listening to a lot of Ethio jazz, and a lot of electric jazz, like the London jazz scene is really amazing. And I do find with electric jazz, which basically means it's kind of avant-garde jazz, but often you have an electric bass in place of a double bass, and occasionally you'll have a guitar as well. And there tends not to be piano.
Okay.
But with
what would be the main instrument then? Because I'm not familiar with
brass sections.
Okay.
The main thing. But it's just it. Whilst they'd never admit it, it means that it's sort of merged with prog a little bit over here. And there are bands like the London Odense Ensemble, who are actually from Denmark, but they play over here, and Ill Considered, who are another great sort of London jazz band. They're just creating such amazing stuff at the moment. And we've all been listening to that and appreciate we're a prog band. We're a different kettle of fish. But we've been, for a while, using only Ethio-jazz scales. So we may have spoken about this before. I feel like possibly we have. But there's an Ethiopian jazz musician called Mulatu Astatke, who's in his 80s now. And he came over from Ethiopia to London, and he studied classical music here, and he started going out to jazz shows. Loved it, but didn't understand why this predominantly black music was using Western scales. He really wanted to introduce African 5-note scales into jazz. He wanted to learn it professionally, but at that time in the 60s, there was nothing in the UK that was teaching jazz as an actual qualification. We were late to that. So he moved to New York, which was the only place actually at the time that was, did have jazz courses. So he studied jazz in New York and invented Ethio jazz, invented a whole load of sort of rules, scales that you can use that kind of blend African instruments and the sort of more Western concept of jazz. It was just so interesting. I love the sound of it. It just has this sort of really slightly disjointed, like it's almost like it trips over itself. I love everything about it, and we all do as a band. So we've started using those scales, and it just means that we've ended up listening to more jazz. And so when we've come to write our new record, our guitarist tracks a lot of the stuff when he comes up with an idea, because our guitarist is a drummer first, and he has a whole setup in his studio. So he'll actually often record an entire track, all the parts, bass, guitars, keyboards, drums, and then we will modify the track, add and change, give our own spin on things. And that's kind of how the band writes. And I found that... Sorry, this is a very long-winded way of answering your question.
No, this is perfect. This is what I wanted.
Okay, great. I found that when, in our past records, we keep getting write-ups and reviews in heavy metal magazines, and I've never considered us a metal band, but I understand that I always default to, on big riffs, playing big driven bass lines, and our guitarist does too, and we make them sound huge on record. I just don't think that's ever necessarily how we meant them when we started. So I sort of got obsessed with the idea of... I was listening to his songs. There's a lot of the stuff is very King Crimson inspired. But we do have a lot of big riffs, and we've been touring one of the new songs we put in our set earlier this year. People kept calling it a beatdown. They were like, "Oh, there was that section with the beatdown," and I was like, "Damn, that's not what I thought that was." But I understand why people think it was that. But I'm really keen to distance myself from that. So I was like, okay, what if the bass is clean and on flatlands even for those big riffs? And so I stripped back my pedal board. I was like, okay, I'm going to take all this away. No phasers anymore, because that's too prog. No drives, and I'll either be clean or I'll be synth fuzz, because synth fuzz gives you and it works really well with flats as well, synth fuzz. So I was like, I want to be those two sounds. So when I really desperately need to be big, I'll do synth fuzz. Otherwise, I'll be clean. And I was listening to a lot of Deloused in the Comatorium, which is the Mars Volta record where Flea plays bass. And the whole thing with that, when Flea stepped in to play bass on that record, bear in mind at the time he was playing modulus basses through his Galen Kruger rigs, and Omar Rodriguez Lopez was like, no, we don't want you to sound like this. Here is a 1962 precision bass, and we've got an Ampeg Heritage, an Ampeg SVT Heritage stack, and no pedals. That's what you've got. And so Flea recorded just with that, and he sort of famously didn't like it, but he worked with it. And when they needed big riffs, he dug in. When they needed soft riffs, he laid back. And the bass is incredibly dynamic, despite having nothing on it other than the SVT rig, an LA2A compressor afterwards, and an old P bass. And I love that. I love that he did that. And I really want to emulate that. So that's my thing for how I'm hoping to write, how I'm hoping to do stuff. I want to simplify my setup and rely more on my right hand for quiet bits to be played subtly, big bits to be played aggressively, and and I think flats are great for that sort of thing. Anyway, I think they're such a dynamic string without it meaning that you've got all this sort of buzzy treble floating all over the place. You really sit underneath things, and in addition, ill-considered do that a lot. Their bass player plays a P bass with flat wounds, and the only effect he uses is an octave pedal. And he does a great job of, pulling it back and making things very aggressive using just the dynamics of the amplifier and that one pedal. So really obsessed with simple setups at the moment for bass. I love that. Let the guitar have all the real dynamics, all the real effects changes. It actually gives guitar more focus and means that it can shine more. If a bass just sits as a constant layer, just like the drums are, that's kind of how I want to, drums and bass, they're here, they do this. Everything else, the synths, the guitars, they can do whatever they want, but drums and bass lock and just do a simple thing.
Kind of dance on top of it, so to speak.
That's it. Yeah. Yeah.
It's interesting that you're talking about, this is something I've thought in my head, but I don't think I've ever expressed to you, is I know you really well. I know you have a inclination towards vintage inspired things, both aesthetically and sonically. But every time I've listened to Polymath, which I think we only briefly mentioned the name of your band. For any listeners who are not familiar, Joe's band is Polymath. Check them out. They're great. It's always had a more like rock and metal influence to being prog to me. Always. Yeah. And I was like, this just doesn't line up with what, if I was to, pick Joe out of a lineup, that's not what I would expect necessarily, especially knowing how you think about things and how you talk about them. But it always tends to, lean in that direction. And is that just entirely because of the riffs, or is that just some older influences? I mean, even the Mars Volta is very rock at the end of the day. They do a lot of crazy things and experimental things, but they are definitely, there's no mistaking them for anything but rock at the end of the day.
Oh, it's definitely like the different aspects of me. I also love that stuff. My favorite album is Architecture, which almost doesn't have a bass because of the amount of effects that Juan Alderete uses on that. Like he almost most of the time, he's going through a coctoire and he's sitting like there's no low end. It's this really pinched middle, and I definitely go through those phases where I'm like, oh, I love that. I want lots of effects. I want all this stuff. I want to be kind of a lead instrument. And yes, it's also a bit of whenever Tim writes a big riff, I'm like, well, a big riff needs a big driven bass line underneath it to back it up. And, part of it is also, I think, when Tim writes stuff and when Tim thinks about bass tone, when he calls out great bass tone on tracks, he'll call out things like I can't think of any main ones. He calls out bands like Town Portal, who are this amazing Polish band. I think they're Polish. Yes, they are. But it's this very 90s grindy jazz bass through a Sans amp sort of sound. And I think when he thinks of great bass sounds, he thinks of that. So often I will just default to doing what is probably the best or the right type of bass support for that music. But this is the first record where I'm like, no, I don't want to do that anymore. I'm old now. I don't care about this stuff. I just want to have this. And I've always thought I've gone through this phase loads of times where I'm like, no, what I love is vintage sounding bass and flats and stuff like that. That's my thing. I want to apply that to polymath, and then I will, and everyone will be like, this isn't really how this should be. And I'll end up being like, no, you're right. I'll switch my setup up. But this time, I had a big chat with Tim about it, and I was like, I really think we're missing a trick by not sounding as vintage as we can. And certainly the producer we use, a guy called Mark Roberts, he basically produces everything heavy in Brighton, the UK, where I'm based, dear listener. And that includes everything that Rabia Masad has ever done. And, like every band that comes out of Brighton basically that's heavy uses him. And he has a similar taste to Tim. And so I think just through the nature of recording with him, I end up with those particular tones. So this time he is still doing this record, but we're actually tracking ourselves. So I'm like, right, I will record with a precision bass going into a red DI, and I'll I'll pop some LA2A on the other end, and that is more or less what I want. I want it to just be that this time, and I'm going to stick to my guns with it, and I think it will allow us to be more jazzy, more vintage proggy, less modern, and it will give the riffs a different character. Make them more dynamic, less obvious. Almost. But that's my thing, and that's my recommendation to any bass players listening. Just I do think less is more, even tonally. When we have all these options, all these things that we can have to support guitars or be more of a lead instrument, so often, actually, what a track really needs is a clean bass underneath everything.
Mm-hmm. That actually leads into a couple different places. One is like more of a statement, and then I've got an actual bass specific question for you. So the statement is like, it's interesting that you're taking and in a good way, in my opinion, like no, this is what I want to do. I want to try. I've tried to do this in the past, and I've always kind of acquiesced to the song or the style. I want to do my thing, and I think that's really admirable. And I have a hard time. Almost everything that I've ever put out, pretty much. I can't think of an exception there, though there may be one. Whether it's content-wise or just my own music, it doesn't sound anything like anything that I listen to on a regular basis at all.
Right.
Like not even slightly in some ways. I listen to a lot of metal. I listen to a lot of old school flavored country, whether it's new or old. It sounds old if I'm listening to it, typically speaking.
Right.
And some pop punk, some emo, some like more punk rock and hardcore bass stuff, but it's all stuff that I've talked about before on the podcast, and much more similar to the bands that I've interviewed oftentimes. Though I did just interview a fantastic reggae artist, which is not something I normally listen to.
Wow, that sounds awesome.
Yeah. Mike Love, not the Beach Boys Mike Love, but reggae Mike Love.
I see.
He's amazing. Absolutely incredible. And the best use of pedal boarding that I've ever seen. He's very creative with what he does. But
right. Okay.
But I think you have a tendency to actually bring your influences to your stuff intentionally. Right. And I don't know how to do that. Like it's every time I sit down to record and I listen to it, I'm like, I might like it, but I'm like, this doesn't sound anything like what I listen to. I've actually been really, really considering running in the other direction from anything I've done before and just doing a straight up like country inspired thing because that's
Oh
what
my
I grew
god,
up with.
you totally should. Yeah, you totally should. That would be really interesting. I'd be interested.
I've threatened to do it for years, even before I had a podcast. My good friend Jess, who's been on the show, and you've met, I believe.
Yeah.
We were texting the other day. He's like, I can't believe you haven't made a country record yet. I'm like, oh, you're onto something. I do love that stuff. But the question I had, so I've been weirdly gravitating towards basses. So
Right.
I think I talked to you about this last time, and I think I maybe have acquired one more since last we spoke, which is I'll go into one of my favorite music shops. There's two locally there's lots locally that I love, but two that I frequent, Hank's Music Exchange and Paradise Guitars here in Portland. And, it's happened multiple times now that I've walked in and I'm like, that's a really cool bass. I'm taking it. Give it to me. I will. This is my bass now. So I've got the Epiphone that I told you about last time, the ET280, I believe.
Yeah.
And
really
then
cool.
I've also gotten an Orville Thunderbird, which I just look at it and smile because it just looks so amazing.
It's just unbelievable
and ridiculous. But
people have started to work out how good Orvilles are, so the prices are going up. But I still don't think they're going to hit the level. Because here's the thing, dear listener. An Orville made in Japan in the 70s or 80s is every bit an American-made Gibson.
Oh, absolutely.
That's probably a less popular opinion in America than it is over here. But it is.
People are catching on.
Yeah, it's every bit as good. And, like I see Orville... do you know what? There's an Orville Black Beauty that I've got my eyes on Reverb at the moment. It's £1,000, or no, maybe it's 1,500, which is what's that? Probably 1,800, maybe $2,000 I think,
something like that. Yeah,
at the moment, which is not a small sum of money, but then I think about how much it would be if it was built in 1982 and it by Gibson, and
about $8,000.
Yeah,
in
exactly.
US dollars. Yeah,
exactly. So that Orville stuff, just the quality is amazing. I'm so glad you've got a Thunderbird from them. A Thunderbird is so you, Blake. It's
it does. It feels like a bass that I should have, and therefore I do. I love it. I'm like looking over. It's hanging on the wall, and it's one of those things I look at. I'm like, look at that. That's great. And it was. I think I got it for $850.
Amazing.
And I just love it. I just love it.
I can't believe you got it that cheap.
Yeah. You
get more Japanese stuff in the US than we do here. Vintage Japanese
especially
stuff.
In Portland. There's a lot of stuff in Portland for some reason. Right. Yeah. And it's had some issues. It's had a headstock repair and things, but it's like, I'm not selling it.
What Gibson hasn't.
True. Actually, it's the only Gibson I have that has.
Oh,
weirdly enough. Yeah. But no, I love that thing. So the question is though, I've got 3 basses now. All by accident in some way. I don't have a bass amp. What should I get? I don't even know. I use plugins for recording bass most of the time, and I like some SVT stuff, and so I have an idea. I've been really looking at some of the Ashdown stuff, but I'm like, I need a real bass amp, but I'd like to be able to record with it as well easily. So like, what should I do? I also have the Boss tube amp expander. I know that's mostly guitar focused, but I think if I get a low enough powered bass head that I can plug into that and use IRs, that would be, probably something that would work. But I'm just like, I don't even know where to go. Do I need an Ashdown? Do I need an Ampeg? What? I don't know. What should I get, Joe? Tell me what to do.
Hello there. I'd like to introduce you to your new best friend, the Chase Bliss Audio Lossy. Lossy is a collaboration between Chase Bliss and Goodhertz. And it's meant to give you some control over those weird digital artifacts that come with very compressed audio. You're making it right now. All the changes that are taking place are strictly coming from my playing dynamics. I'm just interacting with the pedal and letting it do its thing. In some true stereo goodness. If you'd like some more details about Lossy, I'd invite you to head over to chaseblintsaudio.com. I think you're gonna like what you find.
Hey, what's up? My name's Lurk, and I'm the host of Lambgoat's Van Flip podcast. Every week, I have in-depth conversations with bands from all over the scene, big and small. We also like to keep our finger on the pulse and showcase up-and-coming bands on the show as well. So come check out Lambgoat's Van Flip podcast.
This is the story of Whitney Houston,
This is the story of Kurt Cobain,
of George Michael, of Otis Redding, of Amy Winehouse, of Michael Hutchence, Bob Marley. This is the story of Prince,
It's a new podcast series.
about how they died, why they died, and why we're still talking about them so long after.
It's like nothing you've ever heard before.
It's storytelling.
But it's more than that, because rock stars,
They tell us how we feel. They change our mood,
they change the clothes we wear, the people we hang out with.
the way we remember things.
It's them who give us those ludicrous moments, the ones where you...
Jumping around, singing your heart out, feeling understood.
And it's those moments we'll help you remember, the ones you're thinking about right now.
That feeling
That feeling.
is coming soon from Crowd Network.
Just search for Death of a Rock Star on your podcast app.
And subscribe now.
I'll give you 5 great options. Okay, so straight off the top of my head. Number 1, Mixwave, who did the Benson plugin, have just done an Ashdown ABM 600 plugin. It came out this week.
I saw that.
Yeah.
It looks really cool.
Yeah, it's really great. Obviously, Mixwave clearly are fantastic at what they do because they did Benson. So, really lovely people, and they're very good. So, firstly, and also obviously, I'm the marketing manager for Ashdown, so I'll send you a copy. But it's a great it's a great plugin. That is a great recording solution for that sort of thing. I think if you were going to use something like a tube amp expander, like I will always sing the praises of Hartkey. I think Larry Hartkey is the best thing to ever happen to bass amplification. I think he has such a tried and tested through the years range of incredible stuff. I think, people like Billy Sheehan played, left Ampeg for Hartkey for a reason that wasn't financial. Billy Sheehan could play whatever he wants.
Right.
And, he went to Larry Hartkey because that guy makes great amps. And so I do think the HA series, so the 2500, 3500 and the 5500 are incredible. I really like the LH stuff as well. They did an LH 500, LH 1000, and they did a Kilo as well, which was a 1000 watt solid state amp. I think the EQs are really dynamic on Hartkey stuff. They do this great thing on the HA series where they do volume in a really interesting way. So they don't have a gain and a volume. They just have volume controls. One is their solid state volume preamp, and one is running through a 12AX7 valve. And they have individual volume controls. You could defeat one and make it completely solid state or completely valve preamp, or you can blend the two of them. And I find that way of being able to voice your tone, it just incredibly dynamic, because then you've got 2 other rotary controls on HA. You've got a low shelf and a high shelf, lows and highs. And then you have a band EQ, I think it's 7, that you can, or maybe 5, but you can, maybe 7, but you can either have that in or out. And there's so much you can do even without using the graphic equalizer. And I think graphic equalizers for bass are fantastic. I think it's a really interesting, a really good way to be able to visualize your tone. So if you want shape like shapeability, that's probably not a word, then I think Hartkey are absolutely the way to go. The HA stuff is amazing. If you want something a little bit more vintage, obviously the best sounding bass thing ever of all time in all of history is the Ampeg B15, rivaled only in the UK by the Fenton Weil 15.
I don't know what that is.
It was a rip-off of the B15. It's just we got it over here. You know how we had Burns when you had Fender? The Fenton Weil was just that. We couldn't get Ampeg, so someone went, I could probably work out how this goes together from the pictures from this ad. And so Fenton Weil did a similar thing. But it actually sounds amazing. One of our co-hosts, JD Short, he has a Fenton Weil. He's actually, he's American, obviously. He lived in California for the longest time, but since he's come over here, he's been like, yeah, I'm going to get all this vintage British stuff, which we all think of as being really crappy and like not as good as the American stuff. But because he's American, he loves it. It's stuff he's never found before.
Oh, yeah. That sounds great to me.
Yeah, Fenton Wow is cool. But yeah, so Ampeg B15 is brilliant. I do think when it comes to, you said you have some Ampeg plugins, but when it comes to plugins, I do think Plugin Alliance do a fantastic job, and Brainworks, they have their Ampeg B15 plugin, which is just amazing. I also think Line 6 do a great B15 on there as part of their Helix native software, so that's really good. Or if you have an HX Stomp or anything like that, they're obviously really good. But if you want a valve option for that, and
I do.
I will suggest, I have it. I wish I had it to bring out and show you, but it's still in its cardboard box. I haven't unboxed it yet. But I've got and it is an Ashdown thing again. It's an Ashdown CTM 15. Now Ashdown have just, because we're a UK company, dear listener, who are only a little bit in the States, but we've just gone direct with Sweetwater, and they basically just bought 1 billion containers of Ashdown stuff, and they're doing some big sale on Sweetwater at the moment of all the stuff, and so it's all over there now. But Ashdown do something called the CTM 15, which is a tiny little lunchbox sized head, similar sort of to, I guess, a Victory head or like an Orange Tiny Terror sort of style format. It's 15 watts. It has a built-in load box, so you can run it directly into your interface if you want, but you can also run it into an amplifier. So it's the same as a B15. It's all valve, so I think it's got a pair of 6L6s and two EL84s in the preamp, and it is just gain, volume, 3 bands of EQ. It's not versatile. It's just a great sound. I kind of think of it as the same as like if you have like a what's that UA 1600 DI or any valve DI. It's basically it's that. It's not really anything else. Like, sure, run it into a cab. Sounds great into a cab. Obviously, it drives at really low volumes, but almost using it as a DI direct into an interface to record, it means you can get all these gorgeous, lovely, soupy, old school tones with that sort of hairy edge of breakup thing. And then not a lot of money. They're £500 over here, so it's, I don't know what the US cost is at the moment, but because they were originally custom shop and they've started making them now in the Chinese factory, which, it literally doesn't mean you're getting less quality. It just means they can charge less because they're making more units. So it's just a really good sounding recording solution. And
I'm checking the price on it right now.
Yeah, what is the US price?
$649. Oh, this thing this thing looks great.
There you go.
I'm not just saying that because I'm talking to you. This really looks sexy. I like the all blacked out thing going on.
Yeah. It's almost like a black sort of, not corrugated iron, but like it has the chassis has holes in it. I guess it's the only way I can describe it.
Yes, ventilated.
Yeah.
Yes. It looks really simple. Nice. It looks like something I would want sitting on my desk, plugged in, ready to go at all times, basically. Like whenever I'm ready to record bass parts. That's what it looks like to me. That's what I want.
It's just a really wide open sounding, completely valve. Like I remember when they said they were going to do it, and I was like, should we be selling this as a DI, not as an amp head? but they wanted it to also be, an amp head. So it's sold as an amp head, but the thing I would use it as is a desktop valve DI that makes bass sound great, because it's not just great for bass. Like we tried running like a Korg MS-10 into it at Ashdown. It sounded great, and it's just stuff like that. It's just a really good valve DI that's really open and really full range, so it's a really useful tool. And to be honest, in comparison to what you'd pay for something like, and I still obviously rate this as the best DI of all time. The Red DI is the best DI of all time, but a Red DI is 1,200 quid, 1,500 quid, something like that, and you get the CTM 15 for whatever you said, 650 US.
650 basically, yeah. That's a pretty good deal.
Really good. It's a good price.
And you can use it for other things. So I realized as you were going over all these amps, my bass situation is actually even more ridiculous than I was first explaining. You can see over my shoulder there, you see the Benson that's got the light on it.
Yeah.
What that is sitting on is a cab I picked up last year for no reason other than it was huge and sexy looking. It's a vintage, like a late 60s, I'm not sure exactly the year, Guild Thunder Bass cab, 215.
Wow.
That's had the speakers replaced with some old Altex, so way more headroom than the original Thunder Basses had.
Wow.
And I've been using it for guitar, but I'm sure that would sound great with a nice tube head plugged into it.
Amazing. I bet that would sound amazing. Even the thing is with, so the guy at Ashdown who designs the amps is a guy called Dave Green, who used to work for Orange and make Orange amplifiers. And then he went on to have Green amps. If you're in the UK, you're probably more familiar with Green amps.
Or if you're in the Doom/stoner scene, you've seen these.
Exactly. Sure. Exactly. And the reason that Green amps were big in the doomy sort of scene was that Dave Green is only good at making amps insanely efficient. So when he says something is 50 watts, it's really, really loud. It's really loud. They're so efficient. And when they do the percentage of efficiency, because valve amps obviously have low efficiency, which is why, you need larger wattages to make them louder. But when he made so he even did a guitar amp that they did as a limited edition thing. It didn't sell any because Ashdown aren't known for guitar amps, but I got one. It was a 2-watt amp. It was the Peacemaker. They called it the Peacemaker 2. They're actually selling them in like their B stock sort of sale at the moment. I think it's limited to UK and EU only. Sorry, listener, if you're not that in that area. But it was a 2-watt combo amplifier, and it's gig worthy. It's so loud. And so the CTM 15 is exactly the same thing. Whilst it's a fantastic recording amplifier, if you leave the gain down at like 1 or 2 and just dime the volume, that is a giggable volume. It's a giggable level. It will be edge of breakup, but it's a giggable level. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, for the loudest full band stuff. But if you're just doing like a blues show or something like that, it sounds great. It's perfect for that. It's just as soon as it's 15 watts, you can't dare advertise it as a gigging amplifier for bass. I mean, like you couldn't dare, because there isn't like Ampeg released the V4B, which is 100 watts, and everyone was like, 100 watts? That's a bit low.
Yeah. It's interesting when you're talking about some of this stuff, because wattage tells you some of the story, but it doesn't tell you the whole story with bass or guitar. Because my first Benson I got was one of the early Monarchs, back when he offered a EL84 option, and that's what I have, which doesn't sound like any other EL84 amp that I've ever played, because that's not normally my go-to. But I love that thing. He's like, yeah, I think he advertised it as like, I don't remember, 15 to 20 watts or something. I can't remember. It's been a long time. And I tell you that amp, there's no way that people would plug that in and think, oh, this is a 20 watt amplifier. Yeah. It's so loud. And so clean for being the size and weight that it is. It confused me because then I got a 30 watt amp and I was like, well, this is not as loud as my supposed 20 watt. Like, I don't know what's going on here. Yeah. These engineers are too smart for me. I don't understand.
One of the funniest things about sort of Dave Green's amps with Ashdown, and it's something I've been trying to, because I've worked for them for 4 years now, but I keep trying to find a way to market this or to talk about this with people, and I can't because it will just cause so much problem. But Ashdown, certainly in the UK, used to be known for being quiet. People would be like, the amps are a bit quiet. I remember working at GAC at a guitar shop, dear listener, and Ashdown amps been like, they're quieter than Mark bass or sort of Ampeg or TC.
Like for a given wattage, they were quieter.
Yes,
at least that's what people thought.
Exactly. And I remember when I sort of met Dave Green, obviously, and he said what he hated was how he is no good at lying. Like, he hates lying. He hates marketing. He hates all of this stuff. He just wants everyone to be honest about stuff. And so his amps have a completely, what would the word be? Not logarithmic, the other one, but the
audio taper.
Well, I don't. Right? The maybe logarithmic is the right. Oh, it's telling me I'm thumbs downing, but I don't mean to be. It means the rotary controls on Ashdown mean that if you turn it up to full, you're not breaking the amp. You're on the full volume that amp provides comfortably. But most amplifiers set sort of 70-80% of their volume at the 12 o'clock mark, and then do very little past that. Yes. They don't have their volume controls actually in a smooth arc. They have a lot happening between 0 and 12 and not much happening after 12 because people are afraid of going past the 12 o'clock mark. And in Ashdown amps, they had a completely symmetrical, that's not the right word, but a completely even volume control. Right. And people didn't get it because people thought when they put a Mark bass at 12 and an Ashdown at 12, and they're both rated at 500 watts, that the Mark bass was a louder amplifier or more efficient. It wasn't. It was that Mark bass were, and that's not a slight on Mark bass, by the way. It's they were smart enough to see that's how people think. People are afraid of going past 12 o'clock.
That's because that's how it's been for so long.
Of course.
Even, we revere some of these old Fender amps and things, and it's like, I remember as a kid being confused, like, why does this deluxe reverb do nothing? Whoa, way too much. Like, there's a lot of amps that do that, and we've gotten used to it as guitar players, so we sort of, and bassists, bassists, there we go, the word came out, that worked, come on, mouth. And so when it doesn't behave in sort of this strange way that we've become accustomed to, we're like, well, it must be wrong. When really, it makes way more sense for it to just be smooth across the whole range of the control.
Why are we afraid of putting amps on full anymore? It seems like everyone's very worried about that, now. But Ashdown did change. We have moved to a stupid control that does virtually, like 12 o'clock. There you go. That's pretty much all the volume you're going to get, and you get absolutely sod all past that. But and all of a sudden, everyone was like, Ashdown amps are louder.
You're like, yeah,
fine.
okay,
that's fine,
sure, whatever. Oh man. Well, thank you for the education, Joe. You've given me some stuff to chew on.
There you go.
I'm really looking at that CTM now. Like, that thing looks...
yeah, it's really good.
That looks really nice. I'm going to do some more digging. But yeah, I've got to correct this bass situation. This is just absurd to have all these pretty good basses that I really like and no amp. And a bass cab, and it's so dumb.
That's a great bass cab. Yeah,
it looks really cool too, and it was very affordable. I wish I had the Guild logo on it. It's missing it at some point, but
Guild are such an unsung brand. I really love everything they do, and I just feel like I'm not suggesting they're not huge. They're obviously huge. They're owned by Fender. You know, they're a big brand. But
yes, but I think you're right. They're a bit of an underdog brand when they don't deserve to be. All guitars need kickstands in them, you know?
Yeah,
that's just how...
yeah.
Well, Joe, thank you so much for coming on. We'll get into some shenanigans over on Patreon. You know, I don't have to ask you the classic questions. I've asked you them like 4 times. So,
no,
you know.
do it anyway.
Do it anyway? You want to be asked again?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
I'll change my answer.
All right. Joe, what's your favorite Boss pedal?
My favorite Boss pedal is now their new preamp. Do they call it the BP one?
What? I feel like I missed this. I don't know.
No, hold on. I've got to check.
Oh, what do we have? Let's check this out.
Yeah. The BP1W. This thing is absolutely...
Oh, no,
everything.
I didn't miss that. I forgot about it, though.
Yeah, you forgot about it. The booster preamp. That is what I want Boss to be making. Exactly these products. It's old school. It's cool. It's vibey. Why wouldn't you own one? It is amazing.
All right. I like that. Next question. What's your favorite kind of pizza, Joe? Still the same? What are we going with?
I've been... I was big into chilies, I think, last time, yeah. And I like a spicy pizza. But at the moment, I'm in full mushroom mode. So,
I like this. Mm-hmm.
Something with a bunch of mushrooms, preferably like lots of different ones. You know, like you can get a 4 cheeses pizza. I want a 4 mushrooms pizza.
I like the sound of that. That sounds great.
That's where I'm going.
I have an interesting tidbit about mushrooms that I just learned while I was eating oyster mushrooms the other day, which I love a good oyster mushroom. They're just very delicious. And I found out why I perhaps may, as a guy who definitely likes his protein, why maybe I prefer the oyster mushroom, because that is a carnivorous mushroom.
Right.
Did you know that? Yes.
Did not know.
They eat bugs. Like bugs will land on it and they secrete some sort of toxin and it makes them pass out and they get absorbed into the mushroom.
That is absolutely incredible. I'm so into that.
It's very sci-fi, right?
Yeah.
I was like, whoa. I was like Googling oyster mushrooms while eating them, just like, these are delicious. That's how weird I am. I'm just eating raw mushrooms while also Googling.
At a computer. Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
I love it.
yeah. And it was like, carnivorous oyster mushroom. Oyster mushrooms eat eat bugs and nematodes and stuff. It's crazy. Yeah, but they're delicious.
So into it.
So
amazing.
Something you didn't know you were getting on this episode. All right, everybody. We're going to slide over to Patreon. Thank you so much for checking this out. For Joe, this is Blake. And as always, folks, good luck and good tones. Alrighty, folks, I hope you enjoyed that episode with Mr. Branton. I always enjoy talking to him. He is a great dude. And if you've never listened to the Guitar Nerds podcast, I don't know how you even found this one. Go listen to the Guitar Nerds podcast. They have a massive back catalog. I was on the most recent Gear of the Year episode where we wrapped up things for 2023. Now, this is several months ago, and the news might be a little bit old for some people, but if you've never heard it, that's actually not a bad place to start. So go back to that episode if you like to hear one with yours truly, but really catch them every week. It's a fantastic show. I love Joe. I love the rest of the Guitar Nerds. It's a great podcast, and I think you'll really, really enjoy it. But as it pertains to this show, the Patreon episode with Joe is rather special. It's really, really fun. I think you'll like it. I think you'll really like the one I did with Mike Love last week. If you haven't heard that episode, he tells one of the strangest tales I've ever heard on the podcast. I really can't explain the thing that he told me about maybe Sasquatch. Yeah, it gets real weird. So go check that out if you'd like to support the show. If you can't do that right now, please just tell somebody about this program. It really does move the needle in a tremendous way. Please, please, please share this with somebody. It means the world to me. I cannot tell you how important that is for keeping this thing going, for keeping any artist, podcaster, content creator, whatever. If you enjoy somebody's work, tell somebody about it. That's the most impactful thing you can do. Share it on social media. Talk about it wherever you can, because it's really crowded out there. It's really difficult to cut through the noise. And the fact that you're here, you've made it to this point, means a lot. And if you could just do one small favor and tell somebody about this podcast, it would mean the world to me. All right, everybody. I'm going to go back on the internet where I'm chronically existing and make some more content for you. I will talk to you very soon. Feel free to hit me up anytime I'm around. Later. One last thing before we totally sign off here. I just want to remind you that if you do any shopping at Stringjoy, that's Stringjoy guitar strings made in Nashville, that will help me out as well. As I've said for years, I'm heavily involved in that company, and I really do think they're making the best products on the market. So if you would like to try custom strings, go to tonemob.com/stringjoy and check them out today. I seriously love what the team down there is doing. I help them out with all kinds of things, and by you supporting them, you are also supporting me as well. And hey, you need some strings, so why not get some custom strings just for your guitar and playing style? Again, the link for that is tonemob.com/stringjoy, and that will take you right to their website, and you can do all your shopping through there, and that will help everyone involved out. So thank you very much. Talk to you next time. We are brought to you by the wonderful folks at Gun Street Wiring Shop. Yes, Gun Street Wiring Shop. I've talked about them before. I used to say based out of Bend, Oregon, but guess what? Sean moved to my neck of the woods. Sean's in Portland. Sean is awesome and has helped me with a bunch of stuff lately. And if you have wiring needs for your guitar, he can help you too. If you want to get weird with it, he can get weird. If you just need to spruce things up a little bit, there's your guy. He takes all the guesswork out of doing your guitar wiring, and he makes it simple, and his customer service is top-notch, and I can't say enough good things about Gun Street as a company. I really respect Sean and what he's all about, and the product is top-notch. I've got 3 different guitars that now have Gun Street harnesses in them, and I could not be happier. So go to gunstreetwiringshop.com and check them out.
The number you have reached is 100.7 WMMS.
It wasn't just a radio station, it was a lifestyle.
Cleveland is a rock and roll city for sure.
We're gonna be like Chicago's.
Get down! The Wrath of the Buzzard. WMMS. Cleveland.
The rise and fall of one of the most iconic radio stations in America. Profiles, The Wrath of the Buzzard. PROH Files. Subscribe now wherever you get podcasts.